Sim Algyax sigidum hanak kan walnil obuwilksis ton wille hogyacham qaraan alal Sim Algyax Lguweil wallan wa Wanda Good wayam qamqsiwa toyarsit samagit lhagi alal amasaton melkis samagit saqam hiqaq Vernon Smith La when abskidim sqaqam toyars samagit lhagi nilit no lach wallan qaltepl gitniao qaltepl qaniyaetkum qaason when limpqsam qwaqt no agui guhtaakins qamlach yeltu Miriam Daus when qalimpqsam nedit naat en haagl qamsiwamach qsach Sim Algyax wilayam nedit wulash ligidna swatit il dik tiligi khbetech nedit halagyax ligidna lagat odit ton wuladach yuktel wallen giget sulaxens lam dach yuktit ayogum adaurum limichem israchen dit aguyeden dit kwelret nil dem haayem nilach yip dimula hogyaram limsum skip dimula haldem goot halelst dimul blikligit idem willa hogyaram loyul qamaqqas allagats om Sigyon this will quesel dimula ama qandidilstem bekul mismaaxsum get Egyptit si ayok sa hitstit skip alal wilp sa walaxens wilp amadelgas qamqsiwa hidden dit lip ayok dit I haundit litligit Sim Algyax limichem miluchem isetip qatsqotstit xtsanum ilpadaqtit kula lipgaa tont imwilpsiwalaxint amsiwa sawattit ilal Indian Day School llwyatstit no winhaagl Sim Algyaxam halagyaxtit hunayam isawattit no ilal qots iski qan tsiksit ton qanmil haundil Sim Algyax iwan si haagl halagyaxan tlagat no ton luyul wala laal qamsiwa wan halagyaxtit no Iwan gwydgwaden Sim Algyaxam gwydgwaden diml artsenam nedin aguyeden Sim Algyax alal lgi qawsachan dit nom gieshut khalp dik ep qabil un qawsachan qabil ol swatit alal silent speaker gieshut stint qabil ol in guksaldem gol Sim Algyax I vitamin sabakha dim sulaxen di Sim Algyax alki guhtakinam qanla agui guhtakinam dimula dim lepulachtit lepnidit I dim haldem gutit dachgettit idem aml dem willa rande dilstit nittem ranwilt Amen. I'm Wanda Good. I am born and raised in Gitniao, British Columbia. This is the land of my ancestors, and I am currently working as the program manager coordinator for the Gitsan Indian Residential School program, and more recently have taken on the support work for the survivors of the Indian Day School. Through the First Peoples Cultural Council, we've had the opportunity to take on some initiatives around Sim Algyax, our language. We record the elders and the Sim Algyax speakers. We'll take that recording, we'll take the clips of the words or phrases from it, or stories, or whatever the speaker wants to share, and we'll upload them to the archive for our future generations. We're very pleased that one of our youth has taken up a lot of the initiative to learn the language, to really try to incorporate the culture into his life. We were very excited to offer him a position to become involved on the First Voices Sim Algyax archive team. His traditional name is Sim Get, Jackie Good Jr., and we're very happy to have him on board.
Sim Algyax sigrim hanach buwels. Amasach skolgenism Sim Get what. Moet misschien staan geld op skitgeklo en zo goed. Liddags was nog niet. Achter was nog wat. Moet misschien staan en zo goed. Skitgeklo. My name is Jackie Good Jr. That's my English name. Back in 2012, I was introduced to the feasthallers Sim Get, basically meaning the sunshine, as my mom would put it, or my grandmother in them. I grew up in Gitniam. I'm from Kijikiklo. That's where I originate, but we grew up in my grandfather's village, who is playing a big role in teaching me in my journey with the language. Other than that, you could hear it in the feast hall. I felt that it was important to know the language and understand it, so I continued with learning it and whatnot, even after living in Terrace for quite some time. We moved there in 2010. Being away from the language speakers in the community was a bit of a challenge, but I did have my dad. Most of the time I just remember him waking us up, telling us to wake up and get set, and telling us to get ready. And that's how our day started, really. Eventually I caught on to First Voices. Who knew I would have been working with them?
Growing up in Gitniao, we didn't have the luxuries that we have today. We spent a lot of time outdoors. We spent very minimal times indoors. We played a lot. We had lots of adventures, lots of time on the land to learn with our parents and our grandparents, and for that I'm very grateful.
I've had the opportunity to record Jeets Shirley and Jeets Arena before they had passed on, and that's something that'll stay with me for a long time.
The Kitwancool Indian Day School started in 1939, and that was in place until 1986, so it closed just recently. Indian Day School was a federally run school that brought in teachers that were non-Indigenous. Who knows where these people came from. They didn't really have any ties to any communities locally. The Indian agent had written to Ottawa basically saying that he felt that the Indians of Kitwancool needed an education, lobbying the federal government to build a school out here. When I started Indian Day School, I was 4 years old. I recall coming into the classroom, sitting down with the other children, not knowing who these women were. They spoke to us, and I remember not knowing what they were saying. And then they addressed me, and I didn't know what to say, so I tried to say something. I'd spoken in my own language, and the woman laughed at me. Seeing children be beaten, children be belittled, children be yelled at, children yelling and screaming and running from the teachers, strappings with big yardsticks, strappings with big belts. I had seen 2 of my brothers knocked out by teachers there. That resulted in so much harm and so much trauma to our Indian residential school and our Indian day school survivors. I stopped speaking when I was 14, when my father passed away, and I was a silent speaker for about 40 years. My siblings had stopped speaking the language as well. We were silenced. Which means they silenced us. That is my biggest regret in life, is not handing down and passing down the language and more of the culture to my children and to my grandchildren. The language was not allowed. It was illegalized by the Canadian government, as was the feast, the Litligit, as was the dances, as was the totems, as was the singing, the drums.
I'm kind of scared as we continue going on with losing elders. We're actually losing the language too and whatnot. Some language have died, but I believe that they've just gone to sleep.
In 2020, the Kitwankul Indian Day School still stood, and it was a stark reminder of the years of shaming that went on in that building. So when it was scheduled to be demolished, we decided that we would go as survivors, and I went in front of the school and I called back my own spirit that had been traumatized and left there, and called back the spirits of my brothers. And not only that, I called back our language. Sim Algyax. I called back our language, our own mother tongue, not only for just us, but for our future generations.
It's our identity, really, and that's something that we should never lose as a nation. I find myself wanting to teach my nieces and nephews the language, teach them who they are, where they come from.
Just recently, we are experiencing more and more of our survivors are coming back and saying, hey, I do want to learn the language and I do want to learn the culture. Even after Indian Day School had closed, being ridiculed by other speakers because we didn't speak properly. Even to this day, we still have a couple of individuals in the community who will laugh at others who are trying to take up the language, which is shameful, which is regretful, because in order to bring back the language, we all have to step up and be kind and be nurturing and be understanding of the history that our people have experienced when it comes to the attempted genocide of our Alogigit all the way across the country and across the globe, and to stop that violence against one another. Those learned behaviors, we have to check it as soon as we realize that that's what we're doing. We're beating each other down. We are playing the role of the nun. We're playing the role of the priest. We're playing the role of the teachers that were in the Indian Day School. The memories would have a negative impact and a negative effect on anyone's education.
I've been thinking about the times I went to a school in Terrace. It was important to me that I had ties with the Nishkas and Jimson and Taltans. We would talk about our similarities and differences, and quite a few times we noticed that we had a similar dialect. There's for sure some good times and bad. One of my experiences, I just simply mentioned to my buddy that in Gitsan that I needed a bathroom. My teacher overheard me and she kind of took offense to it. She sent me to the office, which was pretty bad, of course.
An Indigenous family in a larger urban center creates and has its own challenges. There's a lot of racism there. There's a lot of marginalization there. And there still exists today animosity toward First Nations people.
I did happen to feel ridiculed and shamed because It was just something so little to talk about in the class.
We're no better off now than we were back then.
There's still some of those challenges out there. That's the thing that we shouldn't have to go through that nowadays. As Indigenous person out there in the world, thinking that that time period is done, it's long gone, but sometimes it still happens.
I still feel shame and embarrassment when coming to speak the language because it's something that was ingrained in us as children. That's one of the major underlying issues that remain today, not just the individual pain, but the ancestral pain that has been passed down from generation to generation. When teaching language or culture, one of the experiences that a survivor will have, including myself, was a feeling of loss and grief. So when those feelings of loss and grief come up, the first response is fight or flight. And many of our survivors will flee because the emotions are just too great. The challenge is to keep the clients engaged and to provide the necessary support through this. And it's a learning process for all of us because we're all on the same boat. What we need to do is bring back the natsits and the nayet within us that will say, note you self-check. We are very respectful people. We don't laugh at each other. Like you're to help others, especially those who are downtrodden and poor. The only way that we can do that is through language and through culture, and to bring that back to our children and to our grandchildren.
Well, I'm ready to get and see the man when I do a look squeeze. Sim Algyax. Get to the garden, Algyax. On help cover Kalims, cover Govilses. To man Juch Kalenum. Yep, skidum Talachti, Sim Algyax. Skidum Talachti, Sim Algyax. Damit scholen die Adaug and Ayorum. Naar een ooit op skidum de Sim Algyax en Kuba Kishoda exit. Achter worden scholen Kuba Marazalees Adaug and Ayorum. Zijn de Talachti Sim Algyax. Naar een ooit am radio en Herels de Wanda and group doing Sim Algyax. I like to see a lot of young people get into it. That's why I said earlier, I'm glad to see this group pushing more Sim Algyax on our young people.
Simgiget kan sigidum hanak kan nilk obulkses. Yuktum yetim skat isa. Niton siwalaksendil simagit skagam lacha el-gitsgukla lam. When hlisl hatlaelst abskidum yetim oyachs nitun ton demula skat isaat. Yetim limich ton dem yetim simhalait. Oyachsem Simgigedem gitten yaw when anachtitem nilithum lach yipsum. Yetem simhalaitem gitsgukla. Go get ton lachsum get nitem yetil simhalait. Why what? We hiya hana